Hey, this is Steven with NorCal Screen Print Supply. This is screen printing video, and the purpose of it is to help you not make the same mistakes I made when I started burning screens for screen printing. The first mistake I made was to not get enough ink onto my film positive. If your film positive is not nice and dark, it's going to let light through and it's going to expose the emulsion that you want to block out, you don't want to expose. What happens then is you go to rinse out your screen and it's very hard to rinse out because you didn't block the light from it enough. So this is a very dark and opaque film. This is what you need to burn a good screen. All right, let's talk about your settings on your inkjet printer. Media type or paper type should be set to premium glossy photo paper. Photo quality should be set to best photo quality, and then any high speed settings should be turned off. A lot of people come to our shop and say, oh, there's something wrong with my emulsion. I can't get the screen to rinse out. And then I talk to them about their films, and it's usually the films. I mean, occasionally emulsion might go bad if it's been sitting around for a year or so, but usually when you're having a hard time rinsing out a screen, it's because the film is letting light through. The second big mistake that I made when I started burning screens was to think that the most important thing was to burn the screen fast or quickly. Oh, which emulsion is the fastest? I would get the fastest photo emulsion. Well, really, durability is just as important, if not more important, than speed of exposure when you're making a screen. You don't want your screen to break down over your print run. You don't want to get pinholes. You don't have to make a new screen, right? You want your stencil to be durable enough to last your whole print run. If your film is properly blocking the light, you can burn your screen longer and cross-link or harden that emulsion even further and still be able to rinse out your screen. So the way you can tell if you're overexposed is your screen won't rinse out, right? Or you get what we call undercutting around the edges of your stencil. It will get blurry, or it won't rinse out, or it's been exposed a little bit underneath the edges. So we call that undercutting. That's usually a sign of overexposure. If your screen is underexposed, it's going to be slimy. After you take the screen off of the exposure unit and you wet it, which we'll get to that shortly, if you rub over here on your screen and it gets slimy, that's a sign that your emulsion's not cross-linked and has not hardened all the way up through the stencil from the light. So you want to check for that. So that's the second mistake, really, if you think about it, if I think about it, that I made previously in life, in screen printing, in history. The third mistake that I made when I started burning screens was to not post-expose my screen after screen exposure. So after you rinse out your stencil, you let the screen dry. You can either put it out in the sun or put it back on your exposure unit and expose it to full UV light, and that will continue to harden and cross-link your emulsion, thereby making the screen more durable so it won't break down during your print run. Here are some additional tips for screen exposure. First and foremost, the biggest tip that I have for burning screens is to immediately get the screen wet after you've exposed it to the light. Peel the film off, take the Scotch tape off. Don't leave it on there and throw it in the corner now, because that's just going to stick to all the other films, right? Take the Scotch tape off and get the screen wet. So we have a dip tank set up right next to our exposure unit. Take the film off, dip it in the dip tank for a minute. What that does is pre-develop the screen. It starts to loosen the emulsion that you've blocked out so you can rinse it out, right? It also saves water because you're not going right to the washout booth and rinsing that thing out. You're loosening it first. And then it just allows you to go into full sunlight and rinse out a screen. Because you've gotten the screen wet, it stops the exposure. So you don't take the screen out in the full sunlight without wetting it, it's going to continue to expose. You're not going to be able to rinse the screen out. So that's probably my biggest tip when it comes to screen exposure. The next tip would be try to keep your area free of dust and lint. That stuff gets into the emulsion, gets on the screens. It dries on the screens in the screen room. It can create a whole problem for you as far as pinholes and stuff like that. If you're burning halftones, you got a piece of dust or dirt in there. It'll blow out the halftones next to the dust. So you want to try to keep dust to a minimum. Let's see, the next thing would be moisture in the air and humidity can cause a problem in your screen room. I bought a small dehumidifier to use during the wintertime or during rainy times when the area has a lot of moisture in it. The emulsion would start to get weird, like slick and shiny. So I noticed that the dehumidifier would help with that. Other tips for screen exposure would be, what would they be? I don't know. Tips, tricks? Maybe you have some tips. Maybe you have some tricks you want to share with us in the screen printing community. Please like, comment, subscribe. Tell us you love us. Tell us you hate us, whatever. And thank you for watching, and see you soon.